Imagine saying all your feelings out loud and find out that your mafia boss heard all. The ground should just swallow me up at this point. What would you have done? But before we step into the underworld, do me a huge favor. Hit that like button and make sure you're subscribed with notifications on. It helps our family grow and ensure you never miss a new release. I want this comment section to be buzzing today. Tell me in the comments, where in the world are you tuning in from? And while you're listening, timestamp your favorite parts. If a scene makes you laugh or swoon, let me know right when it happens. Are you ready? Let's get into the story. I'm not afraid of you, Min-jae. I'm afraid of what happens when I stop pretending I don't want to stay. Zara Williams whispered the words into her phone at 2:47 a.m. Seoul time, her voice raw with exhaustion and truth she'd been suppressing for weeks. She was alone in her hotel room, the city's neon bleeding through sheer curtains, painting her dark skin in alternating shades of pink and blue. Her natural curls were pulled back in a messy bun, and she wore an oversized MIT hoodie that had seen better days. She thought she was talking to herself. She was wrong. 12 floors above, in a penthouse office where the walls were soundproofed for reasons that had nothing to do with business calls, Lee Min-jae sat frozen at his desk. The secure line was still open on his end, had been open for the past 7 minutes, while his tech consultant believed she'd ended the call after their latest briefing. His hand hovered over the disconnect button, caught in a moment of unprecedented indecision. The Frost King of Seoul's underworld, the man who'd never hesitated over anything in his life, couldn't move. God, I'm an idiot, Zara continued, laughing bitterly at herself. Falling for a crime lord. That's not even in the top 10 stupid things you could do, Zara. It's like number 1 with a bullet. Literally. With an actual bullet. Min-jae's jaw tightened. His other hand, resting on the desk, curled into a slow fist. But he listens when I talk about encryption algorithms like it's poetry. He asks questions that make me think harder. And when he almost smiled last week, I felt it in places I didn't know existed. Her voice dropped to barely a whisper. I'm leaving in 2 weeks when this job's done. Back to Detroit. Back to safety. Back to not feeling like I'm standing on the edge of a cliff every time he looks at me. Silence stretched across the open line. In his office, Min-jae finally moved, leaning back in his chair with an expression that would have terrified anyone who knew him. It wasn't anger. It was something far more dangerous. It was curiosity. For the first time in his calculated, controlled life, Lee Min-jae was curious about what happened next. And in his world, curiosity was the first crack in perfect ice. 6 weeks earlier, Zara Williams never imagined her life would intersect with the Korean underworld. Growing up in Detroit, she'd been the girl who could crack her high school's firewall before her 16th birthday, the prodigy who turned down lucrative offers from Silicon Valley to work freelance, because freedom, she'd learned early, was worth more than a corner office and stock options. By 27, she'd built a reputation in the cybersecurity underground. Governments whispered her name in encrypted channels. Corporations paid 6 figures for her to find holes in their systems before their enemies did. She was a ghost in the machine, a digital sentinel who protected empires built on ones and zeros. Her skin was deep brown, her hair a crown of natural curls she refused to tame for anyone. Her eyes held the sharp intelligence of someone who'd learned to read code before she could fully read people. She had a mouth that could drop sarcasm like precision bombs and a laugh that came rarely but exploded like fireworks when it did. She'd never worked for criminals. That was her line, drawn in permanent marker across her conscience. Until Seoul came calling. The job offer arrived through 7 layers of encryption, landing in her inbox like a digital Trojan horse wrapped in mystery. The pay was obscene enough to make her mouse hover over the delete button for a full 30 seconds before curiosity won. The client was anonymous, but the challenge was irresistible. Protect a vast digital empire currently under siege from rival factions, corporate espionage, and law enforcement agencies across 3 continents. Think of it as an intellectual exercise, she'd told herself, knowing it was a lie even as the words formed. The truth revealed itself during her first video conference with the client. The screen had flickered to life, and there he was, Lee Min-jae, whose face she recognized from Interpol briefings she'd stumbled across during previous jobs. The Frost King of Seoul's underworld. The man who'd consolidated 5 warring crime families before his 30th birthday. The living embodiment of controlled violence wrapped in $10,000 suits. He was beautiful in the way a blade was beautiful, all sharp angles and dangerous precision. His face could have launched fashion campaigns if it weren't so cold, so utterly devoid of anything resembling warmth. His eyes were chips of black ice that seemed to calculate the exact value of everything they observed, including her. Ms. Williams, he'd said, his English perfect, but accented, each syllable precisely carved. I need someone who cannot be bought, cannot be intimidated, and cannot be fooled. My research suggests you are all 3. She should have refused. Every survival instinct she possessed screamed at her to close the laptop and burn it for good measure. Instead, she leaned forward, a smirk playing at the corner of her lips. Your research also should have told you I don't work for criminals. I'm not a criminal, he'd replied without a hint of irony. I'm a businessman operating in an unregulated market. The distinction is important. Right. And I'm the Queen of England. For the first time, something that might have been amusement flickered across his face. The salary is negotiable upward. The challenge is not. Someone is currently inside my systems, Ms. Williams. They've been there for 3 weeks and none of my current team can find them. They're stealing transaction records, client information, shipping manifests. In my business, information is more valuable than blood. And more dangerous. That had hooked her, not the money, but the puzzle. Someone good enough to evade detection for 3 weeks was an artist. Finding them would be like playing chess against a grandmaster. 3 months, she'd said. Contract basis. I find your ghost, I seal your systems, I disappear. And we never speak again. Agreed. That agreement had seemed so simple 6 weeks ago. Clean. Professional. Temporary. Now, standing in her Detroit loft after another late-night video conference with Min-jae, Zara realized she'd made a terrible miscalculation. She'd calculated for firewalls and encryption protocols. She hadn't calculated for the way his complete attention felt like being seen under a microscope by someone who actually understood what he was looking at. Her best friend Maya had warned her. Girl, you're playing with fire. Korean Mafia fire. That's like extra hot fire with subtitles. It's a job, Maya. A really well-paying, intellectually stimulating job. And how many times have you rewatched the recording of your last video call with Mr. Tall, Dark, and Felonious? That's for reference. He explains the network architecture, while looking at you like you're a puzzle he's trying to solve. Zara, I love you, but your poker face is garbage when it comes to men who challenge you. And this one? He's not just challenging you. He's studying you. Maya wasn't wrong. That was the problem. By week 5, she'd found the intrusion a brilliant piece of work, a custom-designed worm that lived in the spaces between security protocols like a digital parasite. The code was elegant, almost poetic in its complexity. Whoever had written it was an artist. I need to come to Seoul, she'd told Min-jae during their briefing. This thing is nested deep in your central servers. I can't remove it remotely without risking a cascade failure. His expression hadn't changed, but something flickered in those ice-chip eyes. When? Next week. I'll need 48 hours of direct access to your server room, and I'll need your people to stay out of my way. Done. I'll have my assistant arrange everything. You'll stay in our corporate housing. I'll book my own hotel, thanks. I don't sleep where I work. Ms. Williams, I have enemies who would pay substantial sums for the information currently in your head. You'll stay where my security can protect you, or you don't come at all. They'd stared at each other through the screen, locked in a silent battle of wills. Finally, she'd nodded. Fine. But I want a clause in my contract. Your people don't enter my space without permission. Not even you. Agreed. Though I wonder why you feel the need to specify even me. Because you're the type who thinks agreements are suggestions when they're inconvenient. That almost smile had appeared again. You're learning. Now, a week later, she was on a plane to Seoul, her laptop bag clutched to her chest like armor, wondering if she was making the biggest mistake of her life or just the most interesting one. The Seoul air hit her like a humid wall when she stepped off the plane. Incheon Airport was a marvel of modern efficiency, all gleaming surfaces and directional signs in 4 languages. She'd barely cleared customs when she spotted him. Not Min-jae, she wasn't naive enough to expect the boss himself. But the man holding a sign with her name was unmistakably one of Min-jae's people. Tall, Korean, built like a brick wall in an expensive suit, with an earpiece and the kind of alertness that came from professional paranoia. Ms. Williams. I'm Jin-ho, Mr. Lee's head of security. Welcome to Seoul. Thanks. Though I'm pretty sure welcome is doing some heavy lifting considering the circumstances. Jin-ho's expression didn't change, but something that might have been amusement flickered in his eyes. The car is this way. Your luggage will be collected and scanned before delivery to your accommodation. Scanned for what exactly? Listening devices, tracking chips, explosives. Standard protocol. Right. Standard. Because that's a normal thing to worry about. The car was a black Mercedes with windows so heavily tinted they probably violated several traffic laws. Jin-ho held the door open, and Zara slid inside, immediately feeling like she'd entered another world. The interior smelled like leather and money, the kind of money that didn't ask permission for anything. Seoul flowed past the windows as they drove, a city of contrasts where ancient palaces crouched in the shadows of glass towers, where neon advertisements screamed next to Buddhist temples. It was organized chaos, tradition, and modernity, locked in an eternal dance for dominance. Mr. Lee wanted me to inform you that he'll meet you for dinner tonight at 8, Jin-ho said from the front seat. To discuss security protocols for your work. Of course he did. Does he always arrange his contractors' social calendars? Only the ones whose knowledge could destroy his entire operation if it fell into the wrong hands. Zara laughed, sharp and genuine. At least you're honest about it. The corporate housing turned out to be a luxury apartment in Gangnam, all floor-to-ceiling windows and minimalist furniture that probably cost more than her annual rent. Her luggage was indeed waiting, neatly arranged in the bedroom, and she didn't want to think about the fact that someone had unpacked and scanned every item she owned. She had 3 hours before dinner. 3 hours to shower, change, and prepare herself to sit across a table from Lee Min-jae without revealing that somewhere between Detroit and Seoul, her strictly professional interest had developed some very unprofessional complications. This was fine. She was fine. She was a professional who'd negotiated with CEOs and government officials without breaking a sweat. One dinner with a crime lord wouldn't break her. She was lying to herself, and she knew it. But Zara Williams had built her career on impossible challenges. What was one more? Chapter 2. The Dinner. The restaurant was the kind of place that didn't have prices on the menu, not because they'd forgotten, but because if you had to ask, you couldn't afford to be there. It occupied the top floor of a building in Gangnam, with views that turned Seoul into a galaxy of lights spreading to every horizon. Zara had chosen her outfit carefully. A sleek black jumpsuit that was professional but striking, her curls styled in a high puff that added inches to her height, gold hoops in her ears, and minimal makeup that somehow made her eyes look enormous. She wanted to look like someone who belonged in expensive restaurants, even if her internal monologue was screaming that she absolutely did not. Min-jae was already there when she arrived, seated at a private table near the windows. He stood as she approached, old-fashioned manners that seemed incongruous from a man who'd probably ordered executions before breakfast, and she had to admit, the bastard cleaned up well. He wore a charcoal suit tailored so precisely it looked painted on, a white shirt open at the collar, no tie. His hair was styled back from his face, revealing those sharp cheekbones and the kind of bone structure that made sculptors weep. But it was his eyes that caught her. They'd been cold on video calls, but in person, they held depths she hadn't expected. Intelligence, yes, but also something that looked almost like loneliness. She mentally slapped herself. Stop it. No humanizing the crime lord. Ms. Williams, he said, his voice deeper in person than through speakers. I hope the accommodations are adequate. Adequate is doing some heavy lifting there. I think the shower has more water pressure than a fire hose, and the bed is possibly bigger than my entire Detroit apartment. She sat across from him, refusing to be intimidated by the setup. But thank you. It's excessive and appreciated. That almost smile flickered across his face. I've learned that when highly skilled people are comfortable, they produce better work. Consider it a business investment. Right. Because you're a businessman. In an unregulated market, he finished, and she could swear there was amusement in his tone. A waiter appeared, silent, efficient, probably trained to forget everything he saw and heard, and placed menus in front of them. Zara stared at hers, which was entirely in Korean with no translation. Problem? Min-jae asked. Just admiring the calligraphy. Beautiful. No idea what any of it says. He made a sound that might have been a laugh if it had been allowed to fully form. May I order for both of us? I know what's best here. Normally I'd give you grief about the patriarchal assumption that you know what I want, but since my options are that or pointing randomly and hoping I don't end up eating something that's still moving, sure. Go ahead. He spoke to the waiter in rapid Korean, his voice taking on different tones and rhythms in his native language. It was, Zara thought with some alarm, attractive. The way some men looked good holding puppies or doing woodwork, Min-jae looked good being competent in multiple languages. Get it together, Williams. I ordered a variety, he said when the waiter disappeared. Including some dishes that might challenge your palate, if you're willing. I grew up in Detroit. I've eaten gas station sushi and lived to tell the tale. I think I can handle whatever Seoul throws at me. Detroit, he repeated, leaning back in his chair. His posture was relaxed, but his attention was absolute. Interesting city. High crime rate, economic challenges, but also remarkable resilience and creativity. Not unlike Seoul, in some ways. Except Seoul has better public transportation and fewer abandoned auto factories. True. But both cities understand survival. That's not something you can learn, it's something you live. The first dishes arrived, small plates of banchan, the traditional side dishes that appeared before Korean meals. Zara recognized kimchi, but the others were mysteries. She tried each one methodically, aware that Min-jae was watching her reactions. You're testing me, she said after trying what appeared to be fermented fish. Seeing if I'm the type to pretend to like things to be polite or if I'm honest about my reactions. Am I? The fish thing is an acquired taste I haven't acquired. The spicy cucumber situation is excellent. The little dried anchovies are a texture issue for me, but I appreciate the concept. And the kimchi is so good I might start crying, which would be embarrassing for both of us. This time the laugh escaped, brief but genuine. Honesty. I value this. Lucky for you, I'm pathologically honest. It's gotten me in trouble more times than I can count. I know. I read the incident report from your last corporate job. You told a Fortune 500 CEO that his security was held together with digital duct tape and prayers, I believe. Zara felt her cheeks warm. In my defense, it was. And he was paying me to tell him the truth, not to make him feel good about his IT department's incompetence. He fired you. He did. Then his systems got breached 2 weeks later, and he tried to hire me back at triple the rate. I declined. Because some people need to learn lessons the hard way. And because I don't work for people who shoot the messenger. Min-jae was quiet for a moment, studying her with those unnervingly focused eyes. Is that what you think will happen here? That I'll shoot the messenger if you tell me things I don't want to hear. Honestly? I'm not sure. You're hard to read. Which is probably intentional and probably has kept you alive in your line of work, but it makes negotiations interesting. What would you like to know? To make me less hard to read. It was a surprising offer, and Zara suspected it was also a test. She considered her words carefully, aware that they were dancing around something neither was willing to name directly. Why did you hire me? You've got a whole team of cybersecurity experts. Korean ones who understand the local infrastructure, who don't require translation or cultural orientation. So why bring in an outsider? And don't say it's just because I'm good. You don't survive in your world by making decisions purely on competence. The main dishes arrived before he could answer, bulgogi that smelled like heaven, seafood pancakes crispy at the edges, a soup with ingredients she couldn't identify, but that made her mouth water. Min-jae waited until the waiter left before responding. You're correct. Competence isn't enough. He picked up his chopsticks with the ease of long practice. I hired you because you have no connections to Seoul, no debts to any of the families, no way to be compromised by local politics. You're a variable my enemies can't account for. And because... He paused, choosing his words, because every report I read about you emphasized your integrity. In my world, Ms. Williams, integrity is the rarest resource. That might be the saddest thing I've heard all week. It's reality. I've built my organization on loyalty enforced by fear and self-interest. It's effective, but it's not the same as trust. When you told that CEO his security was garbage, you risked your income to tell the truth. That's rare. That's valuable. Zara picked at her bulgogi, suddenly less hungry. You realize you're basically saying you hired me because I'm naive enough to be honest in a world where honesty gets you killed. Not naive. Principled. There's a difference. Pretty sure principles don't stop bullets. No, he agreed, his voice going colder. But neither does cynicism. At least principles give you something worth protecting. They ate in silence for a few moments, the unspoken questions hanging between them like humidity before a storm. Finally, Zara decided to push. The intrusion in your system, the worm I found, it's not random hacktivism. Whoever designed it knows your architecture intimately. Inside job, or someone you trusted leaked information. Minji's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. I've reached the same conclusion. Which means when I remove it, you'll need to figure out who betrayed you. And in your world, I'm guessing that has consequences beyond a strongly worded termination letter. It does. Does that bother you? The violence of it. He looked at her directly, and for the first time, she saw something raw behind the ice. Every day. But the alternative is showing weakness, and weakness in my position means death not just for me, but for everyone who depends on my protection. So I do what's necessary, and I live with the cost. That's the most honest thing you've said to me. You inspire honesty, it seems. The air between them shifted, charged with something neither could name. Zara felt it like electricity on her skin, dangerous and tempting in equal measure. I should tell you, she said, forcing her voice to stay level, when I'm done with this job, I'm gone. I don't do repeat contracts with clients in your sector. This is a one-time thing. I understand. But something in his eyes suggested he didn't quite believe it, or perhaps didn't want to. I mean it, Min-jae. I'm not cut out for your world. I like my conscience clear and my moral gray areas minimal. Your conscience is clear because you haven't had to make impossible choices yet. When you do, when it's protect yourself or protect your principles, you might find the lines are less clear than you think. Spoken like someone who's crossed a lot of lines. Every single one. And I'd do it again. The conversation moved to safer topics after that Seoul's food scene, the differences between Detroit and Korean winters, her favorite encryption methods, his appreciation for old architecture. By the time dessert arrived, some kind of shaved ice confection that was far better than it had any right to be, Zara had almost forgotten she was having dinner with a crime lord. Almost. Jinho appeared as they finished, materializing at Minji's shoulder like a well-dressed ghost. He leaned down, whispered something in rapid Korean that made Minji's expression go carefully blank. Problem? Zara asked. Minor business. Nothing that concerns you. He stood, buttoning his suit jacket in one smooth motion. Jinho will take you back to your apartment. Tomorrow, I'll have my technical team give you a full briefing before you access the servers. Wait, you're leaving? Just like that. He paused, something warring behind his eyes. In my world, Ms. Williams, problems don't wait for convenient moments. I apologize for cutting the evening short. It's fine. Go handle your minor business. Try not to do anything too illegal. That almost smile appeared. I'll do my best. He left, moving with the kind of controlled purpose that made people instinctively move out of his way. Zara watched him go, feeling oddly bereft, which was ridiculous. This was a business dinner. That's all it was. That's all it could ever be. Jinho cleared his throat politely. The car is ready, Ms. Williams. Right. Of course. She stood, gathering her small purse, trying not to think about how Minji's departure had left the restaurant feeling dimmer somehow. The ride back was quiet. Jinho didn't attempt conversation, for which she was grateful. She needed time to think, to process, to figure out why her carefully maintained professional detachment was developing cracks. Back in her luxurious temporary apartment, Zara stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out at Seoul's glittering sprawl. Somewhere out there, Min-jae was handling minor business that probably involved things she didn't want to imagine. Somewhere out there, his world continued its dangerous dance. And in 2 weeks, she'd be back in Detroit, this entire experience reduced to an interesting story she'd never be able to tell. The thought should have been comforting. Instead, it felt like loss. Chapter 3: The Breach. The server room was a temple to technology, housed 3 floors below ground level in a space that probably violated numerous building codes, but made up for it with redundant cooling systems, backup generators, and security that would make Fort Knox jealous. Zara had to pass through 3 checkpoints, submit to 2 different biometric scans, and surrender her phone before being allowed entry. She loved it immediately. "This," she said to the stone-faced technician escorting her, "is beautiful. Whoever designed this architecture has my respect." The technician, a young Korean man named Park Min-suk, looked surprised that she'd spoken to him at all. "Mr. Lee designed it himself. He has a degree in computer science from MIT. Zara's eyebrows shot up. "Does he now? That explains why he actually understands what I'm talking about during briefings. Mr. Lee understands many things. It's why he's—" Min-suk trailed off, perhaps realizing he was about to say something indiscreet. "Why he's terrifying and effective?" Zara supplied helpfully. "It's okay. I've read his file. Well, the parts that aren't classified at levels I don't have clearance for." Min-suk smiled briefly. "He said you were different." "Different how?" "Not afraid." "Oh, I'm afraid," Zara corrected, setting up her laptop on the workstation they'd prepared for her. "I'm just stubborn enough to do the job anyway." "There's a difference." The work was consuming in the way only truly complex problems could be. The worm was a masterpiece of malicious code, designed to be nearly invisible, to adapt to detection attempts, to hide in the spaces between security protocols like a virus hiding in healthy cells. Whoever had written it was brilliant and had intimate knowledge of Minji's systems. She worked through the morning, barely noticing when Min-suk brought her coffee, excellent, and some kind of rice ball snack, also excellent. The code was starting to make sense, revealing its patterns like a constellation emerging from random stars. "You're smiling," a voice said behind her, and she nearly jumped out of her skin. Min-jae stood in the doorway, wearing a different suit than yesterday, but the same expression of controlled intensity. His presence seemed to fill the room despite the vast space. Sorry. You startled me." She pushed her hair back from her face, aware that she probably looked like she'd been through a wind tunnel. "What are you doing down here?" "I thought the whole point was your people staying out of my way. I wanted to see how you work." He moved closer, looking at her screen, which was filled with cascading code that probably looked like the Matrix to anyone who didn't speak programming languages. "You were smiling. At malware. It's elegant. Beautifully designed. I can appreciate the artistry even while I'm destroying it." She gestured at the screen. "Look at this recursive function. It's completely unnecessary for the worm's operation, but it makes the code more efficient, more beautiful. Whoever wrote this is an artist." "An artist trying to destroy me?" "Well, yes. But still an artist." She caught his expression, something between amusement and exasperation. "What?" "I can't appreciate good work even when it's aimed at my client." "You're unusual, Ms. Williams." "Zara. If you're going to lurk in my workspace, you can at least use my first name." "Zara," he repeated, and somehow her name in his accented English sounded different. More intimate. "And you may call me Min-jae if you wish." Might create a dangerous precedent. Next thing you know, we'll be friends, and I'll have to pretend not to know what you do for a living. Is that possible? Being friends with someone whose work you morally oppose. She leaned back in her chair, considering him. "I don't know. I've never tried. Usually I just avoid people whose job description includes occasional murder." "Occasional?" He raised an eyebrow. "You give me too much credit." Was that a joke? Did the Frost King just make a joke? Don't sound so surprised. I'm human, despite the rumors. Yeah, but the rumors are really specific. And numerous. and often involve bodies. He pulled up a chair, uninvited but somehow not unwelcome, and sat beside her. This close, she could smell his cologne, something expensive and subtle that probably cost more than her laptop. "Tell me about the worm," he said. "Not the technical details, the story of it. You said the creator is an artist. What does their art tell you about them?" It was a strange question, the kind that showed he was thinking beyond the immediate problem. Zara found herself responding without the usual filters. "They're meticulous. Patient. This code took months to write, maybe longer. They're not motivated by quick profit or simple revenge. This is personal. They want to understand your system completely before they destroy it." "There." She paused, frowning at the screen. "They're conflicted." "Explain." "There are safety protocols written into the worm. Limiters that prevent it from causing certain types of catastrophic failure. They want to hurt you, but not kill you. Not destroy everything. It's like..." She struggled for the metaphor, like someone carefully dismantling something they once loved. Min-jae went very still. "Could it be someone who worked for me? Someone I trusted?" "That would be my guess. Someone with deep access, deep understanding, and deep resentment." "Any candidates come to mind?" His silence was answer enough. "I'm sorry," Zara said quietly. "Betrayal by someone you trusted, that's worse than an enemy's attack." "How would you know?" "Because I'm human too, despite my impressive tech skills. I've been betrayed. Different scale than yours, obviously. My ex didn't try to destroy my criminal empire, but the feeling is probably similar." He looked at her with something that might have been curiosity. "Tell me." "Why? We're not friends, remember." "Humor me." She sighed, turning back to her code. "His name was Marcus. Software engineer. Smart, funny, shared my love of impossible puzzles. We dated for 2 years. I thought we were building towards something permanent. Then I found out he'd been leaking information about my clients to their competitors, using my access to sell corporate secrets. When I confronted him, he said I was naive to think my work should be off-limits to entrepreneurship." "What did you do?" "Collected evidence, reported him to the FBI, testified at his trial. He's currently serving 5 years for industrial espionage." "You didn't hesitate?" "No. When someone betrays your trust, you don't owe them mercy. You owe yourself justice." She glanced at him. "I'm guessing that's not how you handle betrayal." "No. My methods are more permanent." "Yeah, I figured." She saved her work, stretching her arms above her head. Her back cracked satisfyingly. "For what it's worth, I understand the impulse. When I found out what Marcus had done, I wanted to destroy him. I wanted him to hurt the way he'd hurt me. But I also wanted to be able to look at myself in the mirror. And can you? Look at yourself. Most days. Some days are harder. That's being human." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, surrounded by the hum of servers and the soft glow of monitors. It was, Zara thought, possibly the weirdest moment of professional intimacy she'd ever experienced. "I should let you work," Min-jae said finally, but he didn't move. "Probably. I'm about 6 hours from isolating the worm's core function. Once I do that, I can start the extraction process." "Will it know that you're removing it?" "Oh, definitely. It's designed to fight back when threatened." "That's when things will get interesting." "Interesting meaning dangerous?" "Interesting meaning I might need your tech team on standby in case it tries to trigger a system-wide failure as a final, screw you to us. But I'm pretty confident I can handle it." He stood, and she felt the loss of his presence like a temperature drop. "Zara." "Yeah. Thank you for being honest about the personal nature of this. It helps to know I'm not overreacting." "You're not. When someone you trusted turns on you, it's personal. Whether you respond with lawyers or bullets, the hurt is the same." He left without another word, and Zara turned back to her code with a strange flutter in her chest that she absolutely refused to analyze. 6 hours later, she was proven right about the worm fighting back. When she finally isolated its core function and began the extraction sequence, the entire system went haywire. Alarms blared, screens flashed red, and for 3 terrifying minutes, it looked like the worm might actually trigger a cascade failure that would corrupt everything. Min-suk and his team rushed in, hands flying over keyboards, following her rapid-fire instructions. Zara worked like a surgeon performing emergency triage, cutting here, patching there, racing against code that was actively trying to destroy itself and take the whole system with it. Firewall 3 is down. Min-suk shouted. Let it go, it's a decoy. Focus on the eastern server bank. It's replicating. I see it. Zara's fingers were a blur on the keyboard, typing commands faster than she'd ever typed in her life. Sweat dripped down her spine. Come on, you beautiful bastard, let me in. The moment of victory was sudden and absolute. The worm collapsed on itself, isolated in a containment partition, its replication functions severed, its connections cut. The alarm stopped. The screens returned to normal. The server room filled with the blessed sound of technology behaving itself. Zara slumped in her chair, her heart hammering. Got you, she whispered. The tech team erupted in cheers, brief, quickly suppressed, but genuine. Min-suk was grinning like she'd just performed a miracle. Ms. Williams, Zara, that was incredible. I've never seen anyone work that fast. Years of practice and crippling anxiety about failure. She was shaking slightly, adrenaline still flooding her system. Is everything stable? Running diagnostics now, but yes, it looks good. You did it. She had done it. The worm was isolated, ready for analysis that would reveal who'd created it. The system was secure. Her job, for all practical purposes, was done. She should have felt victorious. Instead, she felt oddly empty. Her phone buzzed. They'd returned it after she'd emerged from the secure zone. A text from Min-jae, I hear you were successful. Well done. Come to my office when you're ready. We should discuss next steps. Next steps. Right. Because there were always next steps, protocols to follow, final reports to write. The beginning of the end. Zara stood on shaking legs, accepted the congratulations of the tech team, and made her way to the elevator that would take her to Minji's office. The building was quieter at this hour, nearly midnight, most of the legitimate employees long gone, leaving only the skeleton crew that kept the criminal empire running. His office was on the top floor, accessed through a private elevator that required yet another biometric scan. The doors opened directly into a space that was somehow both intimidating and beautiful, floor-to-ceiling windows showing Seoul's nightscape, minimalist furniture, walls lined with books in multiple languages. And Min-jae, standing by the windows, his jacket discarded, shirt sleeves rolled up, looking more human than she'd ever seen him. You look exhausted, he said without preamble. That's what 6 hours of digital warfare will do to you. But we won. The worm is contained. I know. Min-suk sent me real-time updates. He said you were remarkable. I was terrified. There's a difference. Fear and bravery aren't opposites, Zara. Bravery is being afraid and doing it anyway. He poured 2 glasses of something amber from a crystal decanter. Drink. You've earned it. She accepted the glass, collapsing onto a leather sofa that was probably worth more than her car. The liquor was smooth and burned pleasantly on the way down. What is this? Korean whiskey. Expensive and strong like you. She laughed, surprised by the compliment disguised as a statement of fact. Smooth. Is that how you usually charm people? I don't usually charm people. I usually intimidate or eliminate them. Well, that's horrifying and honest. A perfect summary of your whole vibe. He sat across from her, close enough to talk quietly, far enough to maintain propriety. Now that the immediate crisis is resolved, we can analyze the worm, identify its creator. I'd like you to be involved in that process. That wasn't part of the contract. I'm amending the contract. With appropriate compensation, of course. Min-jae. She set her glass down carefully. I need to be honest with you. I shouldn't extend this job. The longer I stay, the more I'm complicit in your world. And I won't cross that line. Even to see justice done? Your justice involves things my conscience can't accommodate. And if I promise to handle this one differently, no violence. Just information. Let the betrayer face consequences through their own guilt. She studied him, looking for the lie, the manipulation. Found only what looked like sincerity, which was somehow more unsettling. Why does this matter so much to you? You've probably had dozens of people betray you. Why is this one different? His jaw tightened. Because this person was family. Not by blood, but by choice. And I need to understand why before I decide what comes next. Family. The word hung between them, heavy with implications. 3 days, Zara heard herself say. I'll give you 3 days to analyze the worm, identify the creator. After that, I'm gone, and what you do with the information is your business. 3 days. He raised his glass in a small salute. Thank you. They drank in silence, the soul night sprawling beneath them, and Zara tried not to think about how natural this felt, sitting with a crime lord, drinking expensive whiskey, pretending they were just two people at the end of a long day. Tried not to think about how much she'd miss it when she left. Tried not to think at all. Chapter 4. The Unfinished Call. The analysis took 2 days of intense work, Zara and Minsuk's team dissecting the worm's code like archaeologists examining ancient ruins, looking for the signature markers that would identify its creator. Minjae appeared periodically, bringing food, asking intelligent questions, never staying long enough to be intrusive, but always present enough to remind her why she was doing this. It was during one of these visits, late on the second night, that the pattern finally emerged. There, Zara said, pointing at a section of code displayed across 3 monitors. See that commenting style? The way they indent here but not there? Everyone has a signature in their code, usually unconscious. This person uses Korean and English mixed together in their notes, which narrows it down significantly. Minjae leaned closer, studying the screen. And there are references embedded in the code, literary references. A line from a Kim Seol poem. A quote from a Murakami novel. Your coder is educated, multilingual, and romantic in a melancholy way. She pulled up another section. But here's the kicker. There's a timestamp embedded in the core. The worm was initiated exactly 3 years ago today. 3 years. Minji's expression went distant. That's when He stopped abruptly, but Zara could fill in the blanks. 3 years ago, something had happened. Something that created a betrayer with patience, skill, and a grudge. I need to make some calls, he said, already moving toward the door. Good work, Zara. Excellent work. He was gone before she could respond, leaving her alone with screens full of code and the growing certainty that she'd just helped set something irreversible in motion. Minsuk appeared with more coffee. You found them. I found enough for Minjae to narrow it down. What he does with that information. She shrugged, trying to pretend she didn't care. You're troubled. I'm complicit. There's a difference. Mr. Lee promised no violence. He keeps his promises. To employees and allies, maybe. But to betrayers. She shook her head. I'm trying really hard not to think about it. She worked for another 2 hours, documenting everything, preparing the final report that would officially end her contract. Her phone buzzed with a video call request from Minjae. She accepted, expecting another briefing. Instead, she got something that looked almost like relief. I know who it is, he said without preamble. He was in his office, the Seoul night behind him, and he looked tired. More tired than she'd ever seen him. Do you want to tell me, or is that classified? My cousin. Young Kwanho. I exiled him from the organization 3 years ago for stealing from family accounts. I thought banishment was mercy, better than the alternative. Apparently, he saw it differently. Family, Zara repeated softly. That's hard. He was like a brother. We grew up together, built this organization together. When I found out about the theft, I covered for him, gave him a chance to leave quietly. And he's spent 3 years planning this revenge. What will you do? Minjae was silent for a long moment. Talk to him. That's all. Find out why, what he wants. Maybe exile wasn't mercy, maybe it was cruelty, and I was too blind to see it. That's very evolved for a mob boss. You've changed my perspective on many things, Zara Williams. The way he said it made her chest tight. I didn't do anything except my job. You showed me that not every problem requires a violent solution. That's not nothing. They looked at each other across the digital divide, and Zara felt the air shift, felt something unspoken trying to surface. I'm leaving tomorrow, she said, because someone had to say it. The job's done. Contracts fulfilled. I should get back to Detroit. Should you? My life is there. My apartment, my reputation, my next jobs. This was always temporary. Of course. But he looked away, toward the Seoul skyline, and she wondered what he was thinking. Min-jae, it's late. You should rest. We can do the final contract review tomorrow before you leave. Right. Yes. Tomorrow. She should hang up. She should say goodbye and end this cleanly. Instead, she said, thank you. For keeping your promise about the violence. For listening. Thank you for helping me see beyond my instincts. He smiled, actually smiled, not the almost smile, but a real one. Sleep well, Zara. You too. She ended the call, or thought she did. But her fingers slipped on the button and instead of disconnecting, the call minimized into the background, still running, still open, microphone still active. Zara didn't notice. She stood at her apartment window, looking out at Seoul for what she told herself was the last time. The city was beautiful at night, a constellation of possibility, and she was leaving it behind. Leaving him behind. It was the right choice. The only choice. So why did it feel like tearing off a piece of herself? God, I'm an idiot, she said aloud to the empty room, needing to hear the words. Falling for a crime lord. That's not even in the top 10 stupid things you could do, Zara. It's like number 1 with a bullet. Literally. With an actual bullet. She paced, running her hands through her curls, pulling them free of the bun she'd worn all day. But he listens when I talk about encryption algorithms like it's poetry. He asks questions that make me think harder. And when he almost smiled last week, I felt it in places I didn't know existed. She paused at the window, pressing her forehead against the cool glass. I'm leaving tomorrow. Back to Detroit. Back to safety. Back to not feeling like I'm standing on the edge of a cliff every time he looks at me. Back to not wondering what it would be like if he... She stopped, laughing bitterly at herself. If he what? If he was a different person in a different life? If I was stupid enough to think this could work? We're from different worlds. He deals in violence and moral compromise, and I deal in code and clear consciences. There's no bridge wide enough to span that distance. In her hand, her phone sat innocently, the call still running, still transmitting every word to the man 12 floors above. I'm not afraid of you, Min-jae, she whispered. I'm afraid of what happens when I stop pretending I don't want to stay. Silence. The city hummed below. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Then she noticed her phone screen, still active, still connected, the timer showing 23 minutes of call time. No. The word came out strangled. No, no, no. She jabbed at the disconnect button with shaking fingers, finally ending the call. The screen went dark. How long had it been running? How much had he heard? Everything? Some of it? Did it matter? Her phone buzzed immediately, a text from Min-jae. Don't leave tomorrow. Her heart stopped. So he'd heard. He'd heard everything. Another text, please. Zara Williams, who'd never hesitated over a difficult decision in her life, stood frozen in her luxury apartment, staring at a single word from a man she should be running from, and felt the entire careful architecture of her life begin to crack. Chapter 5. The Choice. Zara didn't sleep. She paced her apartment until dawn, phone in hand, Minji's texts burning through the screen. Don't leave tomorrow. Please. She'd typed and deleted 17 different responses. Everything from, this is insane, to, what exactly are you asking, to, I can't, to, I want to. None of them felt true enough to send. At 6 a.m., exhausted and wired on too much coffee and not enough sense, she made a decision. She couldn't leave without seeing him face to face. She couldn't run from him, without at least being honest about why. She showered, dressed in jeans and a simple black t-shirt, armor of normalcy, and headed to his building before she could change her mind. The morning security guard looked surprised to see her but waved her through. The private elevator required her biometric signature, which apparently still worked. The doors opened directly into Minji's office. He was there, standing by the windows, wearing the same clothes from their video call hours ago. He hadn't slept either. When he turned to face her, his expression was unguarded in a way she'd never seen, vulnerable, uncertain, almost afraid. You came, he said. Of course I came. You heard everything, didn't you? Every word. Well, that's mortifying. She crossed her arms, defensive despite knowing it was pointless. So now what? You're going to tell me it's impossible? That I'm being naive? That your world and mine don't mix? No. He moved toward her, slow and deliberate, like approaching something precious and easily startled. I'm going to tell you I haven't slept in 3 years the way I slept last night, knowing you weren't afraid of me. Knowing that someone sees me as more than the Frost King. Min-jae, let me finish. He stopped a few feet away, giving her space she didn't want. I've built my life on control. Every decision calculated, every emotion suppressed, every relationship transactional. It's kept me alive and made me powerful and absolutely miserable in ways I didn't let myself acknowledge. And then you showed up, with your sarcasm and your integrity and your complete inability to be impressed by fear, and for the first time, I wanted something I couldn't take, couldn't buy, couldn't strategize my way into having. Zara's throat was tight. What do you want? You. Here. Not because you're working for me, but because you choose to be. I want dinners where we argue about code and philosophy. I want mornings where you challenge every assumption I have. He stopped, struggling for words. I want to deserve you, which means becoming someone who can be chosen by someone like you. That's a pretty speech, she said, and her voice came out rougher than intended. But it doesn't change the facts. You run a criminal empire. I have a conscience that won't let me be complicit in what you do. How exactly does that work? I don't know, he admitted. But I'm willing to try to find out. I spoke to Kwon-ho last night after our call. Really spoke to him, listened to why he felt exiled was worse than death. And I offered him something I've never offered anyone a way back, with conditions. Rehabilitation instead of revenge. It felt. He searched for the word, right? Like maybe your way isn't just idealistic, maybe it's smarter. One conversation with your cousin doesn't change your entire organization. No, but it's a start. And I have resources, Zara. Money, connections, infrastructure. What if I used them differently? What if I started finding ways to exit the worst parts of what I do, transition into legitimate operations, use my network for something other than crime? That's a years-long process. Maybe decades. You'd be fighting your own people, rival organizations, law enforcement who'd never trust you. It's impossible. He smiled that real smile again. I thought you liked impossible challenges. I do, but she stopped because her carefully constructed arguments were crumbling against the weight of his sincerity. But I can't be the reason you change. That's too much pressure. What if you resent me? What if you can't actually do it? What if I stay and watch you try and fail? Then you leave. I won't stop you. I won't make you complicit in anything that violates your principles. He took one step closer. But Zara, you said you were afraid of what happens when you stop pretending you don't want to stay. What if we both stopped pretending? The city was waking up beyond the windows, Seoul coming alive with its daily rhythm of chaos and order. Somewhere out there, Zara's flight was waiting. Her apartment in Detroit was waiting. Her old life was waiting. And here, in this office with this impossible man, something new is being offered. Something terrifying and tempting in equal measure. I need conditions, she heard herself say. Boundaries that don't get crossed. Hope flared in his eyes. Name them. I don't participate in anything illegal. I don't use my skills for criminal purposes. I don't meet with your associates unless they're moving toward legitimate business. And if you backslide, if you go back to who you were, I leave. No guilt, no looking back. Agreed. All of it. And I need time. I can't just move here and play house with the mob boss. I need to see actual change, real progress. So I'll stay for 3 months, freelance consultant helping with your legitimate tech security. We see each other, we figure this out, but I keep my own place, my own life. If at the end of 3 months this is actually working, we talk about something more permanent. 3 months. He nodded slowly. I can work with 3 months. And Min-jae? I need you to understand something. I'm not going to fix you. I'm not going to save you from yourself. If you change, it has to be because you want to, not because you want me. I know. He finally closed the distance between them, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him. But wanting you makes me want to be better. Is that allowed? I guess we'll find out. They stood there, not touching, the air between them electric with possibility and peril. Then Zara made a decision that was either the bravest or stupidest of her life. She reached up and touched his face, her palm against his cheek, feeling the slight stubble, the warmth of skin. He froze under her touch, like he was afraid to move, afraid to break whatever spell this was. "I'm still leaving today," she said softly. "Back to Detroit to close out my contracts, pack up my life. But I'll come back in 2 weeks. And then we'll see if this insane idea has any chance of working." 2 weeks, he repeated, and his hand came up to cover hers, holding her palm against his face. "I can work with 2 weeks. Don't make me regret this. I'll try my very best." She stood on her toes and kissed his cheek, brief, chaste, but full of promise. Then she stepped back, reclaiming her hand, her space, her sense of self-preservation. "I need to go pack. Jin-ho will drive you to the airport." "Of course he will. Because you're still a controlling crime lord who assigns security to people without asking. Some habits die hard." But he was smiling. "Text me when you land?" "Maybe. If I feel like it." "Zara." She paused at the elevator. "Yeah, thank you. For seeing past the fear. For being brave enough to stay. I haven't stayed yet. I'm taking the most insane, calculated risk of my life, and I'm probably going to regret it, and you're probably going to drive me crazy." She smiled despite herself. "But yeah, I'm coming back." The elevator doors closed on his expression, hope and wonder, and something that looked dangerously close to joy. Epilogue, 3 months later. The new office space was legitimately acquired, legitimately operated, and staffed with people who were transitioning from Minji's criminal operations into actual tech security work. Zara had insisted on vetting everyone personally, and to her surprise, Minji had agreed without argument. "You're better at reading people than I am," he'd said. "At least, better at reading their potential rather than their weaknesses." It was slow going. Rival organizations didn't appreciate Minji's move toward legitimacy, seeing it as weakness. Law enforcement was skeptical, setting up so much surveillance that Zara had joked they should charge rent. And some of Minji's own people had walked away, unable or unwilling to change. But others had stayed. Thrived, even. Minsuk was heading up the new legitimate division, his skills finally being used for legal security rather than protecting criminal operations. Jin-ho had transferred from security to operations, discovering he had a talent for project management when violence wasn't the primary tool. And Minji himself was different. Still intense, still commanding, but there was something lighter about him now. He smiled more. Argued with her more. Let her push him toward better decisions without the automatic defensive wall. They'd had their first real fight 2 weeks in, when she discovered he was still maintaining contact with some of his less savory associates. "It's transition," he'd argued. "I can't cut everyone off at once." "Then don't lie to me about it," she'd fired back. "We said honesty. That was the deal." He'd been angry, she'd been stubborn, and they'd spent 2 days not speaking before he'd shown up at her apartment with a full accounting of every contact he'd maintained and a timeline for phasing them out. "You're right," he'd said simply. "I was protecting you from knowing things that would make you uncomfortable, but that's not honesty. So here's everything. No filters." It had been a turning point. After that, they'd figured out how to fight fair, how to push each other without breaking, how to build something new from the ruins of who they'd been separately. Now, 3 months in, Zara stood in their shared office space. They'd moved in together 2 weeks ago, her apartment merging with his in a compromise of her independence and their growing relationship. Watching Minji give a presentation to potential investors for their legitimate security firm. He was good at it. Compelling, intelligent, passionate about the work in a way that seemed impossible for someone who'd spent a decade building a criminal empire. But then, people were full of impossible contradictions. That's what made them interesting. When the meeting ended and the investors left impressed, interested, talking about contracts, Minji crossed the office to where she stood by the windows. "Well," he asked. "How'd I do?" "You were almost respectable. I barely recognized you." "Should I be insulted?" "Probably. But I mean it as a compliment." She turned to face him. "You're actually doing this. Building something real. We're doing it. I couldn't without you. Don't give me too much credit. You're the one making the hard choices. You make me want to make them. That's not nothing. They'd had this argument before, who deserved credit for the changes, and they'd never reached a satisfying conclusion. Probably because the truth was complicated. They'd both changed, both grown, both become different people than they'd been that first night when she'd forgotten to end a call. My mom called, Zara said. She wants to meet you. Minji's eyebrows rose. Your mother. Who you told about me? I told her I was dating someone in Seoul. I did not mention your previous career as a crime lord. I think that's a second meeting conversation, don't you? Probably wise. He looked nervous, which was adorable and completely inappropriate for a former mafia boss. What if she doesn't like me? Then you'll have to win her over with your charm and carefully cultivated legitimate business credentials. She grinned. Also, she's met most of my exes. You're already ahead by not being actively terrible. Comforting. I do my best. He pulled her close, and she let him, leaning into the embrace that had become familiar over the past months. They fit together well, her stubbornness balancing his intensity, his focus grounding her creativity, both of them sharp enough to keep each other honest. I love you, he said into her hair. I don't think I've said it clearly enough. You've said it. Usually while arguing with me about security protocols or threatening to install surveillance on my laptop. That was one time, and I was joking. You were not joking. I was mostly joking. He pulled back to look at her. But I'm saying it now, clearly, with no distractions. I love you, Zara Williams. You've changed my life in ways I'm still discovering. She reached up, touching his face the way she had that first morning. I love you too. Even though you're exhausting and complicated and occasionally terrifying. Occasionally. I'm being generous. He kissed her then, soft and deep and full of promise. It still felt new, this intimacy, this trust, this improbable connection between two people who should never have worked but somehow did. When they broke apart, Seoul sprawled beneath them, a city of contradictions and possibilities. Somewhere out there, Minji's cousin Kwan-ho was working in their new operation, rebuilding trust slowly. Somewhere out there, law enforcement watched and waited, skeptical but hopeful. Somewhere out there, the past was fading and the future was being written in code and courage. So, Minjae said, 3 months is up. Are you staying? Zara pretended to consider, even though they both knew the answer. I might need better coffee in the break room. And a window desk. And maybe a raise. Done, and absolutely done. Then yeah, I'm staying. She smiled up at him. Someone has to keep you honest. And someone has to make sure your code doesn't become sentient and take over the world. That was one time, and it was mostly contained to the local network. Mostly. They laughed, and it echoed through the office space that was theirs, in the city that was theirs, in the life they were building together, imperfect, challenging, occasionally dangerous, but undeniably real. Zara Williams had spent her life solving impossible problems. Turned out, falling in love with the reforming crime lord was just another puzzle to solve. One with no clear answers, no guaranteed solutions, but plenty of interesting variables. And if there was one thing Zara loved, it was an interesting challenge. From 12 floors down, if anyone had been listening, they might have heard laughter, two people finding joy in the most improbable place. But no one was listening. The call had ended. This time, on purpose. The end.